Abby Shermer, and I'm the head policy debate coach at Marist. And I'm here to talk to you today about counterplans. I first want to talk about what is a counterplan, where the counterplan is read, and then I want to talk about how to answer and also how to extend counterplans. And then finally, I want to talk about what are some common counterplans on the topic. So first things first, a counterplan is read by the negative to try to solve some of the affirmative's advantages without actually doing the plan, okay? It's a kind of an alternative policy that they could propose that gives the judge another option. So instead of doing the plan, which might be bad because we've read some disads against it, we could instead do this other thing, which might be better because it doesn't link to the disads. The counterplan is proposed in the 1 and C, and there are several parts. The first part is the text. Just like a plan text, you have to have a counterplan text. It tells the judge exactly what the counterplan is going to do, and it's written just like a plan text would be. This next part of the counterplan, you need to have some solvency. Typically, this is a piece of evidence that says doing the counterplan is a good idea or would work. And just like the F has solvency, the counterplan has some pieces of evidence that say that it can solve. You also need a net benefit to the counterplan, some reason why the counterplan is better than the plan. And typically this is a disad. The disad links to the plan, but it doesn't link to the counterplan. So it proves to the judge the counterplan is a superior idea because it does not link to the disad that you have also proposed. In the 2AC, when you're responding to a counterplan, you want to use the acronym STOP. Okay, that acronym is going to help you remember how to create a 2AC block to the counterplan. The first thing that you want to do is you want to start with solvency, and you want to say that the counterplan does not solve the F in any way, shape, or form. Maybe the counterplan is not very good at solving one of your advantages. Maybe the counterplan just doesn't do something that you need to do in order to help one of your advantages succeed. And that's the part of the debate that you want to spend time explaining to the judge why your plan is super important and why the counterplan could never accomplish the goals that your plan sets out to do. The second thing you have to do in the 2AC is the permutation. So this is an argument that says, well, maybe we can do both of these things at the same time. Maybe it's not a reason why the plan is bad, but instead a reason why you can only do, you can do both of these things at the same time. I'll give you an example. If the AF engages with China and the counterplan was to feed starving children in Africa, there would not be a reason why you couldn't do both. You could do both of those things at the same time. And so the second argument that you want to make is a permutation, that we could do these things at the same time. The third thing you want to have is some offense, a reason why the counterplan is a bad idea. It's like reading a disad to the counterplan. Just like the negative can read disads to the affirmative, you can read disads to the counterplan. And this might be a reason why that counterplan is bad, that actor is bad, and it's just, giving you some offense in the 2AC. The final thing you want to read against the counterplan is theory. This is some theoretical arguments as to why the counterplan, either the type of counterplan that has been read or the status of the counterplan, meaning when they can kick it, is illegitimate. And you want to add some theory to the 2AC if necessary and if possible. Now, moving on to the block. The negative wants to respond to the counterplan in the same way that they respond like as if it was a disad. They always want to start with an overview. You want to tell the judge what the counterplan does and how the counterplan attempts to solve the affirmative. This is like explaining to the judge what exactly the counterplan does. So you would stand up and say, the counterplan solves the AF because, and give a brief explanation of why you capture the affirmative's benefits and you solve their advantages. Moving on to the second part, you want to go line by line, just like you're answering any other argument in the negative block, and go line by line on the flow and answer every argument that the affirmative has made in the order that it was presented. And the line by line arguments, just you have to make sure that you're answering kind of everything the affirmative says. You want to answer their solvency components. You want to explain why the counterplan solves. You want to answer the permutation. You want to answer any offense or disads that they read. And then you finally want to defend your counterplan against any theory attacks. And once you've done that, then the debate can progress. But you need to make sure that you do those two things. Have an overview and go line by line. The final thing I want to talk about is some different counterplans on the topic. And again, I don't have, the name of every single counterplan that's going to be out there, but I'm going to try to describe to you types of counterplans or genres of counterplans that you might want to research or you might encounter. The first one is just don't engage with China. This is great against any affirmative who attempts to engage with China to solve something that's not necessarily China related. An example of this would just be to have the United States do something in the direction of China. But China's not needed and China's not necessary. The negative counterplan could just be like, well, let's cut China out and just instead do that action without engaging China. Net benefits to this would be any disad that's engaging China, right? So U.S. politics, the elections disad. You could also say, any appeasement disad would be a net benefit to this type of counterplan. The second type of counterplan works against affirmatives who pressure or are mean to China. So if the AF is very aggressive towards China and takes a hardline stance, then the counterplan wants to be nice to China. And you could do things like, say, a relations net benefit for China. The other type of counterplan would be if the affirmative is nice to China, the counterplan would be mean to China. Just like the example I explained above, this one would work if they are nice, the counterplan might want to be mean, and you could have an appeasement net benefit to this. The next type of counterplan is a quid pro quo counterplan. Quid pro quos are just a Latin term that means this for that. And so if the affirmative offers something to China but doesn't require them to give anything in return, the counterplan might require China to give them something in return. Offer what we call a quid pro quo. China will give you this if you give us something back in return. There's also types of counterplans that maybe just attempt to solve for one particular advantage. And so this might not have anything to do with China, and it just stands up and it does a particular action that solves only one advantage. The final thing that you could go for or have a type of counterplan on is process counterplans. These are really generic and they just change the way that the AF happens. They maybe aren't about China at all, and they just change how the plan goes through its process. So if the AF wants to engage China over the South China Seas, a process counterplan might say we should consult Japan before we do that, with a net benefit being of Japan relations. Process counterplans are pretty generic. They can be read against any type of affirmative, so there's no limit on that, and they just change the process which the affirmative goes through. So those are counterplans. Remember, you want to read a counterplan in the 1NC. Counterplans help solve some of the affirmative's offense, and there are several types that are going to be on this year's topic.